Welcome, everybody, to the latest and greatest in the podcast, Let's Talk PBM. You are actually seeing me, Dr. Carolyn Burns, in the front seat as the interviewer, and my lovely ladies, who are my dear friends and colleagues, Sarah and MaryAnn, sitting in the hot seat. So you're joining me from my house. Thank you. Welcome from Louisville, Kentucky. You may be asking why we're going to do this. It is because it was almost a year ago today that Sarah and MaryAnn came to me and had this fabulous idea about doing a podcast on patient blood management. And they asked me to be their inaugural guinea pig, if you will. To which I said, of course, I'm happy to do that. Now, I was going to get very dressed up and do black tie, but notice I'm in black t-shirt. So MaryAnn even said, black tea is black tie. So I've got my Let's Talk t-shirt on, and I want to welcome you again to Louisville. Last year, just so you know, they actually drove to me. And along with Sarah's beautiful daughter, who's our IT guru, and they came to my house. We enjoyed a wonderful dinner, had a couple of adult beverages, and decided to just film. Well, we didn't film, we just did audio, right, guys? That's all we did. Because you guys now have gone into the video realm. So for all of our listeners / viewers, here we are with our first end of the year Patient Blood Management Let's Talk PBM podcast. So if I can, I'm just going to, for those of you that have never been on this podcast, I just want to tell you, okay, so I'm Dr. Carolyn Burns. I'm a pathologist. I have been in private practice for many, many years, but over the last over a decade, have been doing patient blood management, consulting, education, et cetera. I'm honored to be the current president of the Society for the Advancement of Patient Blood Management, SABM. And my colleagues, I will introduce. So Sarah Walbolt, she is an RN. She's been a person that's been steeped in PBM and bloodless medicine in Ohio, has been a longstanding member of SABM, has been our now rolling off as senior co-chair, right, Sarah?
Yes.
Thankfully, you're saying, of the annual meeting planning committee, but she's also a new member to our board. She's taught on our certificate course, that she's been out and about in the PBM space for many, many years, helping numerous patients, mentoring other PBM experts. And then MaryAnn as well, an advanced practice nurse from Geisinger, unbelievable program there that you have, MaryAnn, spearheaded, really. Also, board member coming on as the senior co-chair for an annual meeting planning committee at SABM. Eat your Wheaties, my friend. And also mentors, has been part of our CER course, all sorts of things. So when they presented this concept to me last year, I thought it was just totally brilliant, because the point of it, and tell me, Sarah and MaryAnn, if I'm wrong, it wasn't about just providing patient blood management chatter, science, opinions for providers. It was really about providing this to patients, which, sadly enough, many of us will ultimately be. We have to view as providers that we also might be patients. And so the message is really out there for all of us in terms of patient blood management. What is it? What defines it? How do we do it? What's important about it? And how do we support blood health? So with that, before I get started putting you on the hot seat and asking you questions, I want to know if you have any comments. Tell me anything you want to say.
Oh, I'm just happy to be here in the guest seat. It's given me a different perspective to be in the hot seat. And I just remember that first recording with you, Carolyn. And, really, we had a concept we didn't even know if we could pull it off. And just thank you for all of your support. Really, our launch, I think you made that successful. You were a leader for SABM. And so you brought to us an audience that was willing to listen, I think. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. No qualms coming down to Louisville.
Vol. Get your O-O-O-O-L on. Vol.
Louisville. I mean, beautiful experience the whole evening. And we just knew that it was going to go well, because you're just such a firecracker and so passionate about the topic. And as are we. And we just knew it was magic waiting to happen. So
Yep,
thank you.
absolutely.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do, just so you all, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but we're really kind of also winging it a bit, right? Because we want this to really be fun and interactive. So for the audience, again, what we're trying to do is what I wanted to ask, Sarah and MaryAnn, is let's go through first off what inspired you to do this? What made you even think about it? And then we're going to walk through the episodes that you've done. And we're just going to do a few key takeaways. And I will pretty much let you all talk about that because it's been your experience to mold and fashion. And then at times I will weave in and tell you things that really were key to me and things that I heard. So let's start with really let's just start. How did this even begin? What was the inspiration? What's that backstory? We all like to know the backstories.
So I'll start. And I give Sarah all the credit here. I mean, Sarah just brought this idea to me, and I was like, what? But I'm like, yeah, this sounds really good. I feel this can go somewhere. And at the time, I recall thinking that Sarah and I are very approachable, and people are always, at that time, were just very often coming up to us and similar to what you said, like asking, what is PBM? Like, why is it important? And why do you do it? And how do you do it? And, what's this? What's that? So we knew we had to talk in some format. We all hear this staggering statistic that 40% of the world's population is affected by anemia or bleeding in some way. And there's a need for public awareness. I could hear Sarah saying this in my head. There's a need for public awareness in blood health and how the medical community has the ability to manage blood of the patient. And also the public need to understand that there are proper ways that they can participate themselves in their own blood health, keeping an eye on it, making themselves better, and so on. And I think that the 2021 policy brief from the World Health Organization, the urgent call for patient blood management was really a call to action that we heard and drove us to share the word more, like get out there and talk about it more. And Sarah came up with this wild idea. And I knew it sounded great, but honestly, I never realized, and I'm continuing to realize, I tell people this all the time, what an impact we have. And that comes with great responsibility in the information that we're sharing, because we've gotten compliments, and not just compliments, but, reach out connections from people across the globe, which is just wild, that listen. And, people outside America, they don't have the resources like we do to go buy this course and that course. And we really made an impact on other countries and people in other countries and helping them too. So that's really important to me. So shout out to Sarah for coming up with all of this.
I would have to say I wholeheartedly agree with everything that MaryAnn said. I think that those were our key motivations. And really for me at the time, I really felt that I needed to find a new audience. I had been in my patient blood management career for about 5 years. I had done a lot in building for a hospital organization PBM initiatives, and I'm really proud of the work that I had accomplished. But I began to feel over a year or so that my message just was not being heard. And the importance of PBM was just landing on the wrong audience. And there was even some discussion of scaling back, like maybe we had done too much. And you and I know, Carolyn and MaryAnn, that the work is never done in PBM. There's always ways and initiatives to strive and to build. And so that was kind of disheartening. And so I remember the day that I felt like I could stay frustrated and hampered and trying to talk and not be completely understood, or I could try to go and make a larger impact somewhere else. And it was a fearful time for me because I loved my career and I live in a very rural community in Ohio. So patient blood management jobs don't come along very often. But I had some great mentors within the Sabum community. And so when I started talking to them, I could feel their support pushing me, to go make the impact that I wanted to make. And so the podcast idea came along. And of course, I knew the wild person that would jump with me.
Mhm.
So, of course, I reached out to my comrade and she did. She didn't even really blink. It was a quick answer. So that's my story.
Okay. And I love that. And that's why I remember when you all said something to me and we started to plan that initial session. I'm like, yeah, let's just, as we say in Kentucky, we lose the laundry and jump on in it, ladies. We just do it. We get out there and we get it done. And I think that's what really makes a difference is when you sit there and go, okay, now I have a message and I want to share, but it's going to be very evidence-based and it's going to be, what I loved is that you have this concept too of all the other people you wanted to bring into the fold, because it's going to be this constant thing with patient blood management. It takes the village, and we all bring something to it. And that includes, by the way, the patient and their perspective, which is really part of where you all took off with the very first thing that we did. And that was the global definition, because the whole verbiage there was patient centered. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys now. Now we know the backstory. What were your key takeaways, and what did you think that when we were first sitting down, where did you see that would take us in terms of, inspiring you to then get even more people on your bench, if you will, to be pushing this?
Well, it's inarguable that it's always so much fun talking with Dr. Carolyn Burns, and we were just so.
That was that good dinner and that wine I served you.
I knew I'd get some free food and maybe some good bourbon, so how could we not, ask you? But I mean, how could we not, select you as our first guest? And, because you're just always so inspiring and it's so easy. You're just as inspired as we are about talking about PBM. I think one of the most memorable parts of our conversation was talking about the challenges of implementation of patient blood management in organizations. Do you remember this? And we talked about how it's so important. Like, MaryAnn can't start a program, Sarah can't start a program. We could try, but we really need that top level support. We need the top down support of the organization. That's key. And, you need that to impact the patients too, because unless that's coming from the top down, you're really not going to have a lot of great support to help the patient outcomes.
I want to reiterate that we really didn't have a script. So we sat down with our bourbon, our liquid courage, and said, let's just talk for 30 minutes. And then at 30 minutes, we'll cut off and we'll see how we did. And really, there was very little editing. It's probably one of the less edited episodes of our. What I took away from that, I was so thankful that we defined the new definition of patient blood management, because I thought if anything is out there, at least I've told the world what the real definition of patient blood management is, because I think there's been some confusion over the years between, is it management of banked blood or is it management of the patient's blood? And so we made that differentiation, and I felt really good about that. The other takeaway for me was just that we could do this. I mean, you really made that first episode seem simple. And I thought, oh man, we've got this. We're pros. Not every episode goes that way for sure. But it really gave me the confidence that, hey, we're onto something and this could be great.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I think you all nailed it. I mean, with or without me, you nailed it. And I think that was really important for people to know that is, by the way, the published definition and that whole concept of the patient being at the center of it. And it is science, it's steeped in science, but it's applying that science and that care and that giving for the patient, which is what you all brought to that. So I know I appreciated that part of the message as well. So good. So now, because you guys were doing this every month, this is your cadence, right? So the next one, I remember, I really like this. And I just had the opportunity, by the way, to MaryAnn meet, Dr. DeRitter. He came to Sabum for his first time, and I hope he left hair on fire, like we all do when we go to our first Sabum meeting, right? And it was delightful to get to talk with him. But so this was, I think, a really important episode because it did use some different words for most people. It didn't use just informed consent, it used informed choice. So tell me your key takeaways from that and what you felt was the most important.
And following in that trend here about, it was so affirming that we did all a spectacular job together, and we have this, even now, this spectacular following and support affirmation from our PBM colleagues that this is the right thing. Like, it was so important to me that Dr. DeRitter said he was like, he couldn't wait to do an episode because, he's not going to put his name out there on nothing. And he was so enthusiastic about this. I really think we had so many positive comments from patients on this one. This one was a fresh look at, as you said, consent, emphasis on patient choice. And my mentor, Tiffany Hall, always tells me, use the word patient, think about the patient first. And I always hear her name in my head when I say patient. But about the patient having not only the choice to decline, which we hear about all the time, but the choice to choose blood products too and choose blood components, which you don't hear about a lot, and truly participate in their care and what they're getting. And, Dr. DeRitter talks about patients developing this emotional attachment to blood transfusion. And there's really not a good scientific reason to get an emotional attachment or feel better from a blood transfusion because there's not really good oxygen being put into your body from that. But it's people get really emotionally involved to transfusion. And I liked when he talked about that. And that causes like a breakdown in the consent process. And also, he's so funny. No means no. No means no. Shift change is not a reason to ask again. You don't keep asking the patient. Once they say no, that's it. They're done. So
yeah.
That was really enjoyable.
Yeah.
I really appreciated Dr. DeRitter on a couple levels. Number one, the support that he gave to MaryAnn to run the program. Like that's going to be a successful team. And I know that because leadership, they were so in sync and he was so supportive of her podcast. The second was I really appreciated to have a doctor honestly sit down and talk about informed consent or informed choice, because often in my practice, it's just an afterthought. It's something that they want to get done in a rush. It's something that they do very quickly. And they don't really give education. And he talked about that importance. I thought it was fair too. And I had never thought about how he said, I'm not sure if physicians are the right person to have the risk benefit discussion with the patient because they are schooled very little in transfusion medicine. And that's why I think they avoid the risk benefit discussion. I had never thought about that before, and it gave me a new perspective.
Yeah, I think we all are. I mean, if you look at the amount of education nurses and physicians receive surrounding the whole topic of transfusion, it's maybe 1 to 2 hours total. So with all this body of evidence now that's out there, it's a paradigm shift for us, for all of us as providers. So yeah, that was, I thought, a really nice, a nice session that you all had, and really, again, came out of the gate with, this is about the patient. Let's talk about that choice.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that leads us to then your third one, which was more of that global perspective on patient blood management. Because we do in SABM, we are a United States-based organization. We have many, many colleagues in North America that have been part of SABM. But it's really only been within the last 3 to 4 years that we've started to see this influx, this reach out with different memoranda of understanding with our global partners. And that's the important piece, right, for the global definition. So let's go to that one. I think, Sarah, you wanted to comment first on your discussion with Sherry and that global perspective of PBM.
Yeah, it's a funny story. I've never been more nervous to interview someone. I was quite nervous. And if you listen to that podcast, you probably can pick up the voice waiver, even though we kind of recorded over some of it.
Yeah, remember how nervous you were? Usually I'm the one that's like a nervous wreck and like leaving the room because I'm going to pass out. And like Sarah's always got it together. But Sarah.
I think I was just a little starstruck. Sherry has led this from a nursing perspective for so many years. And as nurses, we aspire to be her, right? I mean, she travels the globe teaching and implementing, and helping, assisting in the implementation of patient blood management. She's involved in defining what it is. She's involved in, the World Health Organization initiative. So I think I was a little starstruck maybe, but before that conversation with her, I didn't have a full grasp of what was going on globally. And so even though I had read the World Health Organization policy brief, she really put that in perspective to me, and how it's not a one size fits all for every country. There's not a miracle, algorithm that we can write that will solve anemia around the world. And that was very interesting. Like some places only have an iron cooking pot. I remember her saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, and she definitely has the finger on her pulse of the multiple initiatives going on across the globe. So we were fortunate that Sherry had time to come on and record with us. That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think then that moves us into really where we are with episodes 4, 5, and 6, which, by the way, were the 3. I'm going to hold up the book here. Okay, I'm going to hold up the book, just so you know. We're getting on to the Blood Works and Owner's Guide book, where the next 3 episodes were where you all spoke with those editors in chief, if I can call them that. We had Dr. Shandner, we had Dr. Gross, and we had Dr. Farmer talking about this Blood Works and Owner's Guide and the perspectives they brought to the book, getting the other authors together, the 40-some, many of whom, by the way, were in Sabum, and others around the international community. So let's kind of kick around that. Where were we with REA's, Dr. Shandner's, and then Dr. Gross's, Erwin Gross's, and then Dr. Shannon Farmer's. So let's just walk through those in sequence.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to keep it brief, I could go on about Dr. Shandner all day, but in that episode, I think one important point that he brought out was talking about how people that traditionally would decline blood products have really helped to open our eyes to get to this more non-transfusion default. That was really important, an important historical piece. And we talked a lot about how the book will help enable patients to ask questions. And we'll talk I think about that more with the next couple of folks.
I really appreciated his historical perspective on learning the history. It's fascinating. And also the one key point I remember from that episode was him saying the blood rejuvenates itself, right? We don't need to replace it. Yeah. We need to help harness the body to just rejuvenate itself. And, the blood is a vital organ. We need to take care of it. And we need to harness the body's ability to make blood. I thought that was the key.
That was a great point.
Exactly. And then I think that really fed into that next session with Dr. Gross, because Erwin is kind of the quintessential teacher about what is anemia, how do we view it, how do we approach it, diagnose it, and potentially treat it, and particularly in certain patient populations that we just forget about. MaryAnn, when we first opened, you were saying something about like women and children. So walk me through that from your all's perspective too, because I thought that was just magic, some of the things he said.
Yeah, and Dr. Erwin Gross and Dr. Shandner, Dr. Shannon Farmer also, just all so very kind and intelligent men, and just so patient focused. Like it's, you don't often see like all those characteristics. So again, fortunate to have that trio. But Dr. Erwin Gross, when I think about his episode, thinking about how women, being that special population, really need to speak up about their healthcare needs, and outline like how bleeding to one woman may be different to another woman. It's so subjective, and you're asked questions like, oh, do you have heavy menstruation? Well, what is that? Like, what does that even mean? And he really helped guide us through like what to ask, what questions patients should be asking their physician, and what do different things mean, and just enable that courage to ask questions.
I found myself very drawn to his personality. He's so warm and kind, right?
Yeah.
And I recently got the chance to meet him in person, and yep, he's exactly as I imagined. Really, for me, it was the attention and awareness and the vulnerability of women when it comes to anemia.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I practice in the OR, I see that vulnerability on a daily basis. The abnormal uterine bleeding, the fibroids, any type of OB surgery can quickly bleed. And, when we give birth, we're at risk. So we are a vulnerable population, and it's really important for women to understand their blood health. And I thought he did a great job. He really cares.
Yeah.
Caring.
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And that moves us beautifully into Shannon, who just, again, just heart of hearts, in his soul, in everything he does, really is the exemplar, again, alongside these other gentlemen, to really look at the relationship between the doctor and the patient and how precious that is. So give me your comments there.
Absolutely. Dr. Farmer talking about recognizing your rights as a patient and patient empowerment, and connection, sharing with each other and with your physician your true feelings and experiences, which all contribute to better outcomes, because without these conversations you cannot have better outcomes. And I love how all three of us just smile talking about these folks, because they're all just so fun, and
I know.
they really are. They're all so very caring. I mean, from the top, like everyone is so caring, and that's what PBM is about, caring about patient outcomes and patient choice.
Yeah. I love that he was so willing to share his story of a young man and
Yes.
his battles. Him and Kristen both were so open about their cancer journeys and his mother's health. And I think that really brought a personal aspect. And, I think the best healthcare clinicians or advocates out there are truly people who have been patients. And he's been that from youth. And so he just, that doctor patient relationship is so valuable to him. And so I think that was the takeaway.
That just really brought the saliency to it, didn't it?
Absolutely.
It resonated. And I know after that podcast, I actually, because sometimes I'll WhatsApp with Shannon, and I was, having been a patient myself, I think many of us have been a patient. And I have always said, I don't want to think that it took me being a patient to be a better doctor, but I kind of think it did. And, I don't want to wish anyone to be ill, but it is a very unique experience. And I think it really grows your perspective on that provider-patient relationship. So that's, and now this is also going to give a really good segue to when you all were talking with Dr. Nathaniel Osoro. So let's go back a little bit to where Sherry was with the global perspective. We've got, by the way, Erwin Aryeh, United States based, Shannon, Western Aussie based. And now we have Dr. Nathaniel Osoro, who's been our friend for many years in the bloodless medicine and surgical arena in Nigeria. So we're talking, Sarah, you mentioned earlier about a different perspective you have. MaryAnn, I think you said it too, that with low and middle resource countries, how we have to view this completely differently. And this one opened my eyes as well. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate all these connections you're making between these segues, because there are so many connections. But I can hear Nathaniel in my head saying bloodless medicine is superior, and he's right. Like, he gave us a great perspective. And I've told so many people this story, even outside the podcast. I'll say, can you imagine running a blood bank in a country where power outages are the norm? Like, what a nightmare.
Right.
Like, really puts it into perspective, like where they're coming from. And not only in his area, in the Kingdom of Calabar, but many other countries. Like, the lights will go out and you don't know if they're going to be on for in 2 minutes or in 2 weeks. Like, so that really adds a high level of complication to your process, which almost forces you sensibly to think about going from a non-transfusion approach. It's really cool that they do things that way, and not everybody, but I think that he gave also a really good perspective about not only the not so hot conditions, but they don't have a lot of resources there, and they suspect that a large portion of the donated blood would be unsafe or unsuitable for transfusion anyway. So they don't spend the little bit of money that they have on testing because it wouldn't make any sense. It's just a waste of your money. And they just go ahead with this bloodless approach, which it just seems so elementary. It's just, this non-transfusion default it just makes sense and it works. And he gave a really good case for how exploring, even when your hemoglobin is low, like transfusion of blood or platelet, it's not necessarily the answer. It's just not necessarily the answer.
Yeah. And then, so Sarah, it really then, in a sense, too. So your next episode was with Angel.
Yeah.
And
yeah. I would like to back up.
Person.
Yeah, I would like to back up and say something about Dr. Nathaniel. He really, I think if you even knew how much he went through to get on the podcast, because, one of our standards are that you need a mic, right? You need a mic and you need a headset.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while. We kept kind of doing equipment checks, and he would try different things. And like the mic was so outdated. It was like something that we would see from the 80s, and we'd be like, the sound quality isn't that good. Yeah. Well, wait. I'll figure out something else. And he was so resourceful. He was so passionate about coming on.
Yeah.
And I think that he did a great job creating a case for the science, though. He does this not just because he's low resources. He really made a great case for the science. And I don't know where my mind was, but I had never realized how transfusing could lead to additional bleeding because of the anticoagulant that we put in the blood. So you got a bleeding patient, you're pumping them full of anticoagulant. That's going to cause a problem for you. That was like a real eye-opening moment.
Yeah.
And then to your case, we go to Angel, Dr. Kelly Yude, again, in a middle resource country. So now we're in a middle resource country and we're in Latin America. And he really showed that what we say is impossible with all of our resources and all our technology. And he's blowing us out of the water because it's very possible. They're doing liver transplant largely without any blood products. And so it's very possible. Their outcomes are beautiful. And, he's so elegant. I felt like I gained a family member, in him. And then quickly he pulled us into, the opportunity to help out in the Latin American countries. So those doors are just open and we're just so excited.
There, right? You both went down there. I mean, how fabulous is that? Again, you meet this person via this podcast, and then all of a sudden you're traveling to meet with them and their team. And for me, of course, I really like this podcast because it resonated with me, because at Jewish Hospital, we had a huge liver transplant program. And we were working very hard, and it seemed when I first joined practice, we had used a lot of blood. We were like massively transfusing. And over the years, we started to realize this is not goodness. And we started looking up those patients. I was so proud of my liver transplant team. They were the first out of the gate to go, let's try to do it. At the time, we didn't really say bloodless. We were kind of going pseudo-bloodless. Let's do the best we can.
Right.
And we had some great outcomes. And then listening to him, and then, by the way, hearing that at just recently at the annual meeting, again, my head was just exploding with, here you are in this country where we probably take for granted a few things, but and he talked a lot about his team. He spent a lot of time talking about the team and the education of the team and where we need to be. So again, just this wonderful mix of where we are with global partners that in some way, I'll just say it, are eclipsing some of us.
Absolutely.
Right? They're eclipsing us. We can learn from them. Right, ladies? We need to learn from them.
Just absolutely. Amen. Yeah. And they really do such a great job. They focus in, they have this process where they follow like the 3 pillars and that 9 square matrix. And it's a really thoughtful and standardized approach to patients, and they're all on board with it, and they all go from that approach. And I think that's a big part of what makes that all work for them, like so fantastically.
Their success, absolutely.
You know, I love all Latin America. I love them.
Yeah, well, they are, and in conjunction with the folks in Spain as well, they've been really doing a lot for that entire Latin America, Iberico, you know, patient blood management. We are really seeing a lot of these global partners again jettison out there in the world. Yeah, now I'm going to walk us through, because I know I want to be mindful of time. The next two that you all did were very important for me, I will just say, because again, I did adult pathology, adult transfusion, adult bloodless medicine, patient blood management. So being in the OB arena, and ultimately then, so that was with Dr. Gibbs, and then your next one that we can move to with Dr. Ferroni, being in that neonatal pediatric world, those were really interesting to me just because I didn't practice in that world. And being part of SABM and having OB and pediatric partners at our meetings and as members has been a real eye-opener for me. And I think these are very special circumstances with very special, well, all patients are special. So I don't mean it that way, guys, you know that. But it was just an area that I was unfamiliar with. So tell me where you saw those going. Let's start with Dr. Gibbs.
Yeah, I'm really happy that these two came together in the timing that they did, because as you noted, they were really well suited to each other and really matched well, good progression. Dr. Gibbs, this is another one that I talk about all the time with people, because he really, you know, iron deficiency and OB, like that's a really hot topic right now, you know, and we know this in medical world, but patients don't really know that. But, you know, overall, thankfully, this is starting to be discussed more, and people are developing OB anemia algorithms all the time. And it's just so wonderful for me to know this. But, you know, really, like Dr. Gibbs brought to light one really interesting statement about in current science in OB about the connection between iron deficiency and postpartum depression. And I was like, what? You know, and it really makes a lot of sense. And I'm looking to see more about that. So that was my big thing with Dr. Gibbs. And, you know, I talked to a couple people about that. And as you stated, like even, you know, the most learned physician, you know, there's always something new to learn. There's always something new to learn. And I think that was great.
Yeah, with the Dr. Gibbs episode, I probably felt the most comfortable going in. Like as an expert, I've handled this the most because our anemia clinic catered highly to the pregnant population, and yet he taught me that every patient, whether they come in iron deficient or not, needs to be on iron or needs to be supplemented with iron because they will need it. They need an extra 1,000 milligrams. So I don't know that I had known that previous. Also, his podcast got the most attention from other health care organizations. So we had a lot of reach out after that episode of healthcare organizations wanting to implement and take more seriously their pre-op anemia. So I felt like his had a large impact.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, I know when I've been out recently doing some education and consulting, and I talked to a couple people about this. I said, if you want to kind of get a really good bird's eye view, listen to this, because if you've never walked into that obstetric arena, take a listen, because it might really motivate you. And I like, Sarah, what you and MaryAnn, what you're saying too, when we're learning about women and postpartum depression. I just recently had a presentation with some nurse residents the other day, and they were all young women, most of whom had not had children yet. And their antenna went up. You mean that could happen to me? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So think about this in terms of your own health. So here they are, nurses, not having been pregnant yet, and they have logged this away to be asking about. So again, very powerful. And then we move into Dr. Ferroni's about how this affects neonates and our pediatric patients, and that delicate balance we have with our parents and our kids. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, that was so much insight for me to look at it from a parent's perspective of why they wouldn't want their children poked, because I could never understand why we weren't using IV iron so much in the peds, because it works so well, right? And he gave us that compassion of, well, look at it from what a peds, you're going to poke them, you're going to make them sit still for an hour. Also, I just have so much admiration for the work that he does, down in Baylor, taking care of these very, very sick children who need their hearts repaired, and his focus and passion for managing their blood and not sending them home with iron deficiency. I think that was my big point from takeaway from him.
Yeah, and he provided a good segue too with, the long-term deficits of iron deficiency and the connection of, the mom delivering the baby in an iron deficient state, can contribute to problems. So that's why I was glad that those two went together. But,
exactly. One after the other. Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Couldn't have worked out better. And it was just did. But yeah, similar to what Sarah's saying, like he, talked about too, like, it's weird because like people will be like, oh, blood transfusion, yeah, okay, if you need it, but then IV iron, what's that? Like, what's that? And the irony is that it's probably so much safer and would cause less problem, but everybody's so afraid of it. And it was really astounding when he too gave that personal perspective of the empathy from being in that position, and do I want this and do I want that? So that was not great that it was for him, but it was great that it worked out that he was able to give.
Oh, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like
again,
practitioner perspective.
Exactly.
And absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful perspective.
I love it when we all share our stories like that. I think again, it resonates, and again, I'll say it brings that saliency to what we do. And so as we get into your last two, so your one with Dr. Christian Manorthi, who, by the way, Ananthi has been, again, a long-standing, fabulous, dutiful member of SABM. She's been on committees, and I just really, I just adore her. Malaysia, by the way, is going gangbusters.
Absolutely.
And she really represents all of her Malaysian PBM community when she did this for you. So let's let you wax philosophical about that particular episode too.
Yeah, definitely. Ananthi is just a joy, and she is very thoughtful and cautious about how she presents things. She's very detail oriented, and she was just wonderful to work with. But I thought that how she presented her argument was very good. She did the two case studies side by side, and this patient had this situation and they were given blood and we moved on, and then the other patient was in a similar situation and they were given iron, and we addressed all their PBM related problems and they moved on. But they had the better outcome because we looked at the whole patient and we decided what was causing this anemia and really had that patient involved in choice and decision making, whereas the other patient just got blood and we got them out of there. Like we treated the number, we treated that situation at the time, but we didn't really look at the whole clinical picture was the case. So, and then when they did look at the whole clinical picture, that had a better outcome. And that's really what PBM is all about. Like, I'll go on all day about that.
I really enjoyed the point, and I think maybe MaryAnn stated it in the podcast, but her episode really brought out the value of the blood in the patient. We don't want to lose the value of the blood that's in the patient. And also their willingness to know their limitations and to reach out across the pond for help and guidance. I thought that was very admirable because they took care of the patient, but they didn't wing it, right? They actually reached out and got some consult there. And I think that's the team approach that PBM is.
I like that Sarah brought that up because I think a lot of people think that PBM is like holding a sword to the blood bank and we're only going to let you have it if we have enough. And that's not really what it's about. I mean, that's,
Right.
if we can be good stewards of the products that we do have, and like all the time we have to be good stewards of the products that we have, and we have to get to the bottom of what's happening with the patients and not just treat them and street them and get that number to where we think that number should be. Like it's not about the number or the trigger or anything. It's about treating the patient and the patient being interactive with us. And if you saved a blood product that would have been inappropriately used, great, but that's not PBM. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Sarah.
Yeah, exactly. So now it gets us to our last one you guys did, which is all about the data. And a lot of us in the PBM world, we know Kevin Trentino. He has been a huge part of this data matrix, if you will, from the Western Australia program and beyond. And I mentioned his article, on many, many different occasions about the basics, the intermediate, and the advanced sort of data that you need. I think data can be a bit scary to many of us. I was really glad that you engaged with him to talk about this. So give the nuts and bolts of that and where you saw that one to be really helpful to all of us that are out there. Some of us may be struggling with data.
Well, I think that this one too, we knew this was going to be a breeze also. Not that any of it was easy. With logistics was a nightmare for this episode with Kevin just moving back and I was in a different state. But really overall, it was just so easy and easy like Sunday morning. Kevin, whenever him and his team come out with a paper, everyone in PBM land is so excited and we can't wait to read it because he really breaks down, as you said, what could be something very overwhelming and difficult and, hard to understand. He really breaks it down to a level that, people like me can understand. And I really appreciate that. And we asked him about, why data is important for patients. Like what should patients care about data? Like they don't have to, but really that patients, should know and be confident that practitioners are using data-driven, evidence-based medicine. And, he emphasizes that you don't need all this fancy equipment or anything. You just need, a little bit of data and a good thought about what kind of metrics you need and what to look at. And it doesn't have to be complicated. And there's a lot we could do with very little data. So I really appreciated that.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think that he brought home the point of why data in a healthcare organization should be important to the patient. And mainly that is because data is going to give you your healthcare decisions. You're going to be able to see where the best outcomes come from in the way that different ways that you treated your patients. And that's very important. And I really liked his discussion of, if we don't have data, what are we going off of? Conventional wisdom, gut feel, beliefs. Numbers don't lie. Data doesn't lie. And so we want to incorporate that into our medical practice.
Right. I think it's that whole concept, and we talk about it a lot, is that if you don't know where you are, your baseline, it's not going to help you go where you want to go.
Right.
And so starting out at a certain level and growing that data as you can and what you have available, you do the best you can in that, and then apply that with the science to move your program forward. So I think it is a wonderful way to kind of round out what you all have done. So let me kind of take stock a little bit. I'm watching, we are at about 49 minutes. I know this is a little longer than you guys have done, but I think it's been an important one, at least for me. It was really great you wanted to do this because I think it's important people know, again, where were you at baseline? Where have you gone? I could tell you just from my perspective, I saw with each one of your sessions, I heard you develop your message. I saw it going even further every single time. And I loved that for you. I loved the way that people were so comfortable chatting with you. I've listened to podcasts that you feel like they're very stilted. This has
Yeah.
not been. So I congratulate you both. And I think it
Oh, thank
really
you.
has helped us take this not just to the provider level, but to the patient level. So my last question then is, what's up next for 2024? And what do you want us to know? Give us the little nutshell, the little nugget. So we're going to stay tuned, like your trailer. I want your trailer.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, I've been thinking about how long can we do this? But really, we're growing with the science of PBM, and really, there's always there's an ongoing need to transmit like this education. PBM programs are popping up all the time, and more knowledge and more recognition of patient blood management, more interest. So, we really need to. We'll continue to zone in on what needs to be talked about and what's new in this rapidly growing state. Not only the science, but just the recognition that this podcast is a great way to traverse through this whole dynamic changing paradigm of PBM and everything. We'll stay focused. Yeah. Just roll with the future.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of opportunities coming our way. I'm excited about that. Having the first year under our belt, and we have some different advisors that we are kind of figuring out where we really want to go. But there seems to be a thirst for our podcast, and we would like to do it even more. We've got almost an entire lineup of guests already slated for 2024.
Great. That's awesome.
I would love to be able to do this, twice a month. Of course, recording a podcast, doing the research, planning the podcast, and then editing a podcast, all of that takes a lot of resources. So, donor support or finding a way to finance the resources that it takes is certainly on our mind. That's why we have built into our website a small donation button so that people can donate if they so choose. And also, if a patient or an organization feels stuck, there's now the ability to schedule some time with us.
Yeah.
We're
just going to keep trying to do the best that we can to help people.
Great. Yeah. I think that's the bottom line. We're all in here. We're all in here for the same reason.
Right.
Exactly.
Any and everything that we can do every single day. We talked about this at the annual meeting at SABM, is we serve the work.
Yep.
And that means the work is the work in progress for our patients and on their behalf. And so as providers, we want to be best in class, best in show. And that's not to pad our curriculum vitae, but because we want to be best in best in show for them. And I can tell you, I've told my family members and many, many friends to tune in. I've also told them about the Bloodworks book, and I have gotten so many comments of, oh my gosh, I never knew that. I'm saying a lot of times I will tell them, well, you know what? I didn't either. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, ladies. And I realize you're not here with me, and we're not having our adult beverage and having dinner, but we will do that another time. But it's just great to be with you. And thanks for sharing everything that you do for the benefit of PBM across the world.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation and found some takeaway or new thought that improves your health. We would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to us on our website if you'd like to see what we're up to. Our website is letstalkpbm.com. If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and on our YouTube channel.
Special thanks to our guest and our producer Delaney Coronado and the entire production team for all of their expertise in content creation, technical abilities, and dedication to our message. We appreciate the experts who drive this medical movement forward and our affiliate partnerships who support the work that we are doing. Until next time, stay connected to your blood health.